On a cold Thanksgiving night, Tom Henderson, a broke mechanic in Michigan, skipped dinner with his family to help a family stranded on the highway. Little did he know the man driving the broken-down SUV was the CEO of one of the largest automobile companies in America. A few days later, a fleet of luxury cars showed up at his old dealership, carrying a life-changing offer. From a small act of kindness, Tom unexpectedly finds himself at the center of an inspiring story of kindness and opportunity. But that's just the beginning, because the most amazing things are yet to come. Welcome to Kindness Stories, where small acts lead to big miracles. Today, we're going to tell you about an ordinary mechanic who chose kindness on a cold night, not knowing it would change his life forever. Join us as we explore this surprising and heartwarming story. In a small town in suburban Michigan, snow began to cover the streets as cold winter winds blew through the streets. The quiet town was nestled along a major highway, where cars sped by with little stopping. The residents were used to harsh winters, and everyone was eager to get home to a cozy Thanksgiving dinner with their families. Tom Henderson, a man in his 40s, stood in front of his old auto repair shop with greasy hands and a tired look on his face. The sign that said Henderson's Auto Repair was faded and crooked from years of service. Tom was a skilled mechanic known for his dedication and honesty. He never overcharged his customers and sometimes even repaired cars for free for those in real need. But that was the reason his shop never made much money. Inside the shop, the hum of machinery and the familiar smell of oil made Tom feel right at home. Today, he decided to close earlier than usual. "It's time," Tom muttered as he hastily wiped his greasy hands and turned off the lights in the shop. His wife, Linda, had called twice to remind him about Thanksgiving dinner. Linda and their 2 young children were waiting for him to return home for dinner, something they had looked forward to all year long. Tom closed the shop and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the biting cold. Snowflakes were falling on the shoulders of his coat. He looked out into the distance where the highway lights were still glowing, the cars rushing home. A thought crossed his mind. This might be the last holiday I'll ever get to keep this shop. Unpaid bills, mounting bank debts, and a lack of customers were putting Tom under a lot of pressure. Suddenly, the phone rang in his jacket pocket, pulling him out of his thoughts. He took it out and saw an unfamiliar number. "Henderson's Auto Repair, I'm Tom," he said, in a hoarse voice. On the other end of the line was an urgent man's voice, mixed with the sound of a baby crying. "Hello, sorry to bother you at this hour, but my family's car broke down on the highway near exit 7B. We don't know what to do. I heard you're the only one open around here. Please, help us." Tom glanced up at his old truck parked near the shop. He looked back at the locked shop door, then back at the phone in his hand. There was a palpable conflict. It was Thanksgiving night. His family was waiting, and he had promised Linda he wouldn't work today. But then the man's helpless sigh and the sound of a baby crying echoed through his mind. "They need me." Tom knew what it was like to be left out in the cold snow, especially when there were children in the car. He sighed, put his hand to his head in confusion, and finally replied, "Okay, I'll be right there. Try to keep the kids warm." Tom went back to unlock the shop door, quickly grabbed his tools, and threw them all into the back of the truck. He texted Linda, "I have to help a family in trouble on the road. I'll be late. Sorry for you and the kids." Tom drove into the night, the old car's headlights sweeping the snow-covered road. He couldn't stop thinking about his family and the unfinished Thanksgiving dinner. But most of all, he knew he couldn't leave a family out there in the bitter cold of a Michigan winter. As the night wore on, the snow fell harder and harder, coating the highway signs in white. The roads, which had been deserted on Thanksgiving night, were dark and bitterly cold. Tom Henderson sat in his old truck, the wipers clattering, trying to clear the snow from the windshield. The car shook with each bump, but Tom paid no attention. His mind was focused on the call. The headlights swept over a dim sign, exit 7B 2 miles. Tom slowed down, eyes straining for any sign of a wrecked vehicle. Then he saw it. A black SUV parked off to the side of the road, its emergency lights flashing red and yellow in the thick snow. He stopped a short distance away, turned off the engine, and quickly pulled his heavy coat over his shoulders. The wind blew through the fabric, making Tom cringe, but he hurried toward the SUV. The window rolled down and a middle-aged man poked his head out. His face was worried and tired. In the back seat, Tom could see two children, one asleep on the seat, the other curled up in a large coat. A woman, probably his wife, was sitting in the passenger seat, turning around to rub the child's back. "Are you Tom Henderson?" the man asked, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Yes, it's me," Tom replied, giving him a small, reassuring smile. "Let me take a look at your car." The man opened the door and stepped out, clutching his coat to protect himself from the strong wind. He held out his hand to shake Tom's, introducing himself hastily. "I'm David, and this is my wife Sarah. Thank you for coming. We really didn't know what to do." The car suddenly died and wouldn't start again. Tom nodded, rolling up his sleeves despite the cold stinging his skin. He opened the hood of the SUV, revealing an engine nearly encased in snow and ice. "In this cold, your battery might be dead or your ignition system might be bad. I'll check it out," Tom said, pulling a flashlight from his tool bag. "You two stay in the car and keep warm. I'll take care of the rest." David hesitated, then got back into the car, closing the door to shield his wife and children from the wind. Through the window, Tom could see Sarah wrapping the children in extra layers of clothing, trying to keep them warm. Even without saying it, he knew the situation this family was in. Tom crouched over the engine, his flashlight shaking from the cold. He quickly realized the car had a dead battery and a bad ignition system. "It's not that bad," he said to himself, and went back to the truck bed to retrieve the spare battery he always carried in the winter. Setting it down in the snow, Tom began wiring and trying to get the system started. The snow was falling thicker, covering Tom's hair and sticking to his shoulders. His hands were numb, but he worked patiently. After nearly 20 minutes of struggling, a glimmer of hope appeared when the engine sputtered and roared weakly. Tom stood up, breathed on his cold hands, and tapped lightly on the car door. David opened the window, his face showing surprise and joy. "The car is starting? You're awesome. For now, you need to replace the battery and check a few other things, but I got it started so you can get home safely," Tom replied, wiping the sweat from his brow and giving a small smile. David quickly took out his wallet and offered to pay the fee. "Here, take this money. You've helped us so much, I don't know what to say other than thank you." "No need," Tom shook his head, his voice firm. "Just pay me for the parts, the repair is free. It's Thanksgiving. I think everyone deserves a little joy." David stood still, looking at Tom with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. He had not expected to meet such a person on this cold night. "At least give me your address. I want to thank you later," David said, his voice sincere. "Letter? Henderson's Auto Repair, near the gas station on Main Street," Tom answered simply, and turned back to gather his tools. Before getting in the car, David turned back to look at Tom and said loudly, "Thank you, I really do. You just saved my family." Tom just smiled, waved goodbye, and got into his old truck. The engine roared in the silence, the headlights casting a long trail of light through the thick snow. Looking in the rearview mirror, Tom saw that David's SUV had already started moving, merging into the thin traffic on the highway. On the way home, although the cold still surrounded him, Tom felt warmer than ever. He thought of Linda and the two children and muttered to himself, "It's okay to be a little late. What matters is I did the right thing." Allah bent. Little did he know that that act of kindness would change his life forever. A week had passed since that cold Thanksgiving night. Tom Henderson's life continued as usual. The winter days in his small Michigan town were still bleak, and Henderson's auto repair was eerily quiet. Tom sat behind the counter, going over the books. The red numbers on the paper danced before his eyes, reminding him of the store's deteriorating financial situation. Unpaid bills and looming rent were giving him a headache. Even though he had been in the business for nearly 15 years, Tom had never felt so exhausted. The shop had few customers. The townspeople tended to go to larger repair shops in the city, where service was quick and modern facilities were available. Tom knew this, but he would never compromise on quality or overcharge to keep customers. Honesty was more important to him than profit. The doorbell rang suddenly, pulling Tom from his thoughts. He looked up through the snow-fogged glass and was completely surprised. A fleet of luxury cars parked right in front of the store. Shiny SUVs and a jet-black sedan with a shiny logo rolled slowly into his small parking lot. "What's going on?" Tom muttered, frowning in surprise. He stood up, wiping his greasy hands on a nearby rag. The door opened, and a man in a black suit walked in first. It was none other than David Miller, the man Tom had helped on Thanksgiving night. "Tom Henderson." David stepped forward, a bright smile on his face. "David?" Tom was surprised, taking a step back. "Why are you here? Did your car have trouble again?" David burst out laughing, while Tom stood there, confused. Following David were a few others, also in formal attire, looking serious. A strange feeling began to creep into Tom's heart as he saw the huge difference between them and the simple space of his shop. "No, my car's fine, thanks to you. But I came here for something else today," David said, reaching out to shake Tom's hand. "I didn't get to say this the other night, but I'm not just some guy who got into trouble on the road. I'm the CEO of Miller Motors." Tom opened his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "What did you say?" Tom stammered, looking at David with wide eyes. "Miller Motors, one of the largest car companies in the country," David repeated, his face calm but sincere. "And that night, it was your kindness that changed my mind. I kept thinking about how you treated my family without even knowing who we were. You asked for nothing more than to help others, and that touched me." Tom stood there, stunned, feeling as if everything around him had slowed down. He never thought that his small action that night would lead to such a big event. David continued, "We are looking for reliable local partners to expand our chain of auto service centers nationwide, and I think there is no one better suited than you. I want to turn Henderson's Auto Repair into an official Miller Motors service center. We will provide you with financing, technology, and customers. You will still be the operator, but your store will have everything it needs to grow." The room fell silent. Tom felt his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. An opportunity he had never dreamed of was right before his eyes. I don't know what to say," Tom stammered. "Are you sure? I'm just a small mechanic. The shop isn't even modern. You are honest and dedicated to your work. That is what matters," David said firmly. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met. Your kindness is something money cannot buy. And I believe that with our support, you will do even greater things." Tom looked around the small shop where he had spent nearly half his life repairing cars, from junkies to luxury cars. He thought of the long days, the sleepless nights of worry, and the smiles on the faces of his customers as they drove away after his help. He smiled. "If so, I agree," Tom said, his voice trembling but determined. David patted him on the shoulder, a satisfied smile on his face. "Great. We'll start right after the break. Trust me, Tom, this is just the beginning." The news spread quickly throughout town. People began to whisper about the story of Tom Henderson, the mechanic, who had skipped Thanksgiving dinner to help a stranger's family and now had a chance to change his life. Local newspapers and small media began to cover the story, turning Tom's story into a symbol of simple but powerful kindness. That evening, Tom came home late. Linda and her 2 children were waiting for him in the living room, As he told the story, Linda was speechless, tears of happiness and pride welling up in her eyes. "I always knew you were the kindest and most sincere person I've ever met," Linda whispered, squeezing his hand. "Finally, you've been rewarded." Tom sat there, silently looking out the window at the falling snow, his heart filled with emotion. He understood that miracles do not come from grand plans or calculations, but simply from a small act that comes from the heart. And that's just the beginning of a new journey. That winter passed more quickly than Tom Henderson had expected. Just a few months after the deal with Miller Motors was signed, the old auto repair shop called Henderson's Auto Repair had a completely new look. The old faded sign was replaced with a shiny, modern one that read, "Henderson's Service Center, Miller Motors Partner." Not only that, inside the shop, the old machinery and outdated tools had been replaced with the most advanced equipment Tom had ever seen in his life. The opening day of the new center was a breath of fresh air for the small Michigan town. Cars lined up outside the store, and curious and excited locals came to visit. Tom himself stood at the door, wearing his new uniform with the Miller Motors logo on the chest, looking both excited and nervous. Linda and her 2 children were there, watching proudly as Tom shook hands with each customer and smiled broadly. David Miller also arrived that day, appearing in a formal suit but not losing his usual friendly demeanor. He spoke briefly to the crowd. "Today, I am proud to be working with such a valuable person like Tom Henderson. In the modern world, we often forget the core values of honesty and kindness, but Tom has proven that they still exist and can change the lives of people around them." The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Tom just bowed his head and smiled modestly. For him, this was not only a life-changing opportunity, but also an affirmation that the values he had pursued for so long were not in vain. Tom's shop was no longer the empty place it used to be. Customers from all over town and the surrounding areas flocked to use the service. They knew this was not just a professional repair center, but also a place where they would be treated sincerely and fairly. With a new staff and modern equipment, Tom could work quickly and efficiently while maintaining the same quality. Even though he's busier than ever, Tom hasn't changed his nature. He sets aside a portion of his profits to help those in need, especially low-income families. He offers a pay-what-you-can policy for customers who can't afford the full cost of repairs. Sometimes, he even repairs cars for free for people who really need help. With support from Miller Motors, Tom also offers free short courses on basic car maintenance to local residents. He believes that giving back to the community is one way to help others by giving back. His classes are always packed with people ranging from single mothers to young people just learning to drive. A month before the holiday, Tom announced that his store would be open for free on Thanksgiving Eve to help anyone who had car trouble on the highway near town. The news spread quickly, and people were surprised by his decision. Many asked Tom why he would do this on a day when everyone was resting and spending time with their families. Tom just smiled and replied simply, "Umatat." "Because I've been there, in the cold, and I know what it feels like to have someone in need. I don't want anyone to have to go through that alone." That Thanksgiving night, Tom's shop opened brightly amid the snow. Tom and a few employees stood ready, with tools and warm blankets and hot coffee. Cars that had broken down on the highway were quickly brought into the repair shop. Tom's family joined in. Linda brought homemade cookies, and the kids helped with small tasks like serving drinks. A young woman with a small child in her arms had tears in her eyes as she received her car, which had been repaired for free. "You really are a hero," she told Tom, her voice shaking with emotion. Tom just shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I'm just doing what anyone should do on a special day like today." Newspapers began to report on his story. An article titled, "Mechanic Skips Thanksgiving to Help Strangers, Then Changes His Town," was shared everywhere. Praise and admiration poured in from all over America. Tom Henderson, the simple man, the little mechanic, had now become a symbol of kindness and sharing. Late one evening, when the garage was closed and the snow was still falling outside, Tom sat with his family. Linda rested her head on his shoulder, and the two children were fast asleep on the sofa near the fireplace. Tom smiled happily as he watched them. He knows that his greatest success isn't in the new store or the sudden fame, but in the difference he makes in his community, and no matter how his life changes, he will always hold on to the simple values that brought him here. Kindness, Tom thought, was more powerful than anything he had ever known, and sometimes a small act on a cold night could open up unexpected miracles. 1 year after Henderson Service Center partnered with Miller Motors, the small Michigan town has seen significant changes. Not only has it become the area's most respected auto repair shop, Tom Henderson's shop has also become a symbol of kindness and sharing. The townspeople call Tom an everyday hero, a nickname he always shakes his head and smiles when he hears it. Tom is promised continue to open his shop for free on the holiday. The sign outside the shop read, "If you run into trouble on the road, we're here to help you get home safely." Tom's van and his staff would cruise the town and nearby highways, carrying tools, warm blankets, and hot coffee. It became a tradition that everyone looked forward to. The whole town knew that there would always be a warm light from Tom's shop, ready to welcome those in need on a cold winter night. On Thanksgiving night, Tom and his family and a group of employees gathered at the auto repair shop. Linda brought out delicious cookies and pies, and Tom's two kids ran around, bringing water and coffee to those in need. An elderly couple walked into the shop, their hands shaking with cold. Their old car had died in the middle of the road. Tom and his employees quickly checked and fixed the problem. As they were about to leave, the elderly man grabbed Tom's hand, his eyes filled with tears. "We don't know what we'd do without you. The world needs more people like you, Tom." Tom squeezed his hand and said with a warm smile, "I was just doing what everyone should do on days like this. We all need to help each other, right?" That moment seemed to linger, reminding everyone of the true meaning of Thanksgiving. It is not only a family dinner, but also an opportunity to share kindness and help others. A major newspaper reported on Tom and his team's Thanksgiving tradition of opening their doors. The headline, "A little mechanic creates miracles of kindness," touched the hearts of millions across America. Many people called the store just to thank them and send their best wishes. Some mechanics in other states even contacted Tom to learn and started running free Thanksgiving shops in their local areas. Tom never thought his small act would make such a big splash. Late that night, with the factory closed and the snow still falling silently outside, Tom sat in his familiar old chair, looking out the window. The lights from the street lamps reflected off the white snow, creating a peaceful scene. Linda walked over, placed a hot cup of coffee in his hands, and sat down beside him. The two children were fast asleep on the sofa nearby, exhausted from a long day of helping their father. "What are you thinking?" Linda asked softly, her voice warm. Tom smiled, his eyes full of thought. "I think sometimes the best things come from simple choices. If I hadn't heard that call that night, maybe things would have been very different." Linda took his hand and smiled. "You chose to do the right thing, Tom, and the world is a better place because of people like you." Tom looked out at the night sky, where the snowflakes were still falling steadily, covering the town in white. He knew that he was no hero, nor had he done anything great. But he understood one thing deeply: kindness, no matter how small, can create miracles. And sometimes it is the moments when we help someone that open up a new path for ourselves. To Tom, that's what life is really about. Doing the right thing, no matter how big or small, no matter if anyone notices or not. Outside, the lights from Henderson's service center still shine brightly in the night sky, like a beacon in the snowstorm, always ready to welcome those in need. And Tom knows that this is just the beginning of the meaningful things he will continue to do in the future. Tom Henderson's story shows us that kindness, no matter how small, can create unexpected miracles. Sometimes a simple decision opens doors that are bigger than ever. Remember, every act of kindness you give can be a light to others and yourself. Thank you for joining Kindness Stories today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to spread more warm stories.